Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. It's funny, something we all kind of take for granted, staying cool in the summer, can actually be a huge challenge globally when you really think about it. So today we're going to explore that link, how the growing demand for air conditioning affects the planet.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic, so to
Yeah.
speak. And it's about way more than just like comfort.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. We're diving into this research you shared to wrap our head around the economics of it all, the environmental impact, and most importantly, what we can actually do about it.
And there are some seriously cool solutions on the horizon, from new technologies to some really innovative policy ideas.
Before we get to those, though, let's talk numbers. I was floored when I saw that by 2050, we could be looking at over 5.5 billion AC units in use around the world.
It's a staggering figure when you think about it. More than double what we're dealing with today. It really drives home the sheer scale of this demand for cooling as the planet gets hotter.
It's a weird paradox when you think about it. Like we're using AC to deal with rising temperatures, but then by doing that, we're just feeding the problem. More energy, more emissions. It's a cycle.
Exactly. And, one of the biggest drivers is economic growth, especially in developing countries. That research you sent, it really highlighted how in places like India, China, Brazil, as more people rise to the middle class, AC becomes less of a luxury and more of a necessity.
It's that thing, right? Like as people's lives improve, it's only natural they want a comfortable place to live and work. And in a lot of the world, that means air conditioning. Makes sense, but it also shows just how intertwined economic development and the environment really are. What's the impact, though? Like, how bad is it?
Well, for one thing, just think about how much electricity we're talking about. Space cooling already eats up something like 7% of global electricity use. I saw that in one of the articles. And a good chunk of the world still relies on fossil fuels to generate that electricity.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a lot of CO2 going into the atmosphere. To put it in perspective, ACs in 2022 alone were responsible for something like 1 billion tons of CO2 emissions. That's on par with some entire industrialized nations.
A billion tons. Wow. Okay, I see what you mean. It's not just the energy we use either, right? Don't a lot of AC units use refrigerants that are way worse for the environment than even CO2?
Exactly. Hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs, those are the big ones. And they can be thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide when it comes to trapping heat.
Yeah.
Even a tiny leak from an AC unit can have a real impact.
Thousands of times. I had no idea it was that bad. So even if we somehow switched to all renewable energy overnight, we'd still have this ticking time bomb of leaky refrigerants to deal with. You got it. The good news is there are international efforts happening to address this. The Kigali Amendment, for example, it's aiming to phase out HFCs, hoping for like an 80% reduction by 2047.
Okay, that's something at least. Sounds like people are starting to recognize the problem, which is always step one, right?
For sure. And it goes beyond just refrigerants. The UNP, the United Nations Environment Program, they've actually put together a whole set of guidelines to encourage energy-efficient cooling tech and practices.
So these UNDP guidelines, what are they actually pushing for?
Basically, they want governments and manufacturers to get stricter with their standards, for new AC units and appliances.
Makes sense. But what about all the old AC units already out there? The ones that aren't as efficient? Are we just stuck with those, or is there a way to make them better?
See, that's where things get interesting. One of the papers you shared talked about something called solid-state cooling, uses shape memory alloys.
Shape memory alloys. Okay, gonna have to explain that one. Sounds kind of sci-fi, to be honest.
It's pretty wild, honestly. There are these special alloys, and get this, they can actually change their shape based on the temperature. And when they change shape, they absorb heat. Then when they go back to their original shape, they release that heat. Pretty cool, right?
So no more worrying about those greenhouse gases leaking out.
Yeah.
If that actually works, it's a game changer.
Exactly. And since it's solid state, there are no moving parts like in a normal compressor, so it's crazy efficient. Way more efficient, some researchers think, than anything we have now.
Wild. If they can actually make enough of this stuff, it could really change everything. What else is out there?
There's another thing, kind of complex, called variable refrigerant flow systems, or VRF. Imagine like a bunch of indoor AC units all hooked up to a single outdoor one.
So you have different temperatures in different rooms. That'd be amazing for energy saving.
Exactly. It's all about efficiency. VRF systems are getting really popular, especially in those big office buildings where you can really save a lot of energy by only cooling the rooms that need it.
Smart cooling. I like it. All this tech stuff is cool. But what about, just using nature to cool things down?
Good point. And actually, a lot of researchers are looking into that. Passive design is a big one, designing buildings from the ground up to naturally stay cooler.
Huh.
Like, think about windows placed a certain way, or overhangs that block the sun, or even just using lighter colors on the roof to reflect more heat.
I was at this place once. It had a courtyard in the middle with a fountain and everything. Even on a super hot day, it was nice and cool inside, and they didn't even have the AC cranked up.
There you go. That's passive design in action. And of course, you can't forget about trees. Planting more trees, especially in cities, that can really help with the whole urban heat island thing.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Cities get crazy hot because all the concrete and asphalt just soaks up the sun's heat like a giant frying pan. But trees can help with that, right?
Yep, they're like natural air conditioners. Plus, who doesn't love a bit of green? It's a win-win. And speaking of win-win, what about powering all this with renewable energy? Solar, wind, that kind of thing.
Now you're talking. But how realistic is that? Like, I know solar and wind have their limitations. They depend on the weather and all that.
There are always challenges, for sure. But the potential is huge. That article we talked about, the one about solar-powered AC, it also mentioned wind-powered solutions. Not as common yet, but they could be a great fit for big buildings or even factories.
So instead of those massive cooling towers, you could have wind turbines, quietly generating clean energy. I like it.
It's a pretty exciting thought. And hey, let's not forget about geothermal.
Geothermal. I thought that was more for heating. How does that work for cooling?
It does sound weird, but those geothermal heat pumps, they're surprisingly versatile. They can move heat in both directions, between a building and the ground. So in summer, they pull the heat out of your building and dump it into the cooler ground, like magic.
No way. That's amazing. It's like a natural AC system built into the earth.
Exactly. Super energy efficient, and it really cuts down on fossil fuel use. This is all great and all, but let's be real. People care about convenience, and most of all, cost. How do we get everyone on board with this stuff?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe more like a billion-dollar question.
Yeah.
Yeah, billion-dollar question for sure. But hey, maybe people are starting to get it right. Like, I feel like more and more people want to buy things that are good for the planet.
It's true. People are definitely more aware now of how their choices, what they buy, how they live, it all adds up and affects the environment. Those energy efficiency labels we talked about, they actually matter to people now.
So those Energy Star labels, they actually work. People see those and it makes a difference.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just Energy Star. There are tons of these eco-labels and certifications now. People are looking for those. It means something. Shows them the product's not terrible for the planet.
It's like you're not just buying something, you're saying, this is the future I want.
Exactly. And all of that, it puts pressure on the companies, the ones making this stuff. They have to change if they want to stay in the game. Got to make products that are good quality, affordable, but also, not going to destroy the planet.
So it's like a good cycle, right?
Yeah.
People want better, companies make better, everybody wins.
Definitely a step in the right direction, but we can't just rely on people buying the right stuff, We need, actual rules, policies, things that really push for big changes.
Right, of course. What can governments actually do? What kind of policies would make a real difference?
Well, for one thing, they can set higher standards for buildings. Remember, we talked about the UNEP guidelines. Those are great. But each country can take it further, set their own rules about energy efficiency, building codes, things like that.
So new buildings would have to be built with better insulation, better windows, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and it's not just new stuff either. We got to fix the old buildings too. Give people reasons, incentives to upgrade their places, make them more efficient.
Makes sense. Make it easy for people to do the right thing. What about, tax breaks? Don't governments do that sometimes?
Financial incentives, definitely. Tax breaks, rebates, subsidies, you name it. Reward people for investing in renewable energy, solar panels, or just buying more efficient appliances, stuff like that.
So it's got to be this combo, right? Rules, rewards, and just making sure people understand what's going on.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But hey, at least we're talking about it, finding solutions.
Exactly. It's a team effort, Governments, businesses, people like you and me. But the research is clear. We can definitely make things better. More sustainable cooling. It's not a pipe dream.
Well, that's a relief to hear. This whole deep dive has been, honestly, kind of mind-blowing. The science, the economics, the tech, even just thinking about how we can all make better choices. It's a lot to process, but I'm feeling kind of hopeful, I gotta say.
Me too, me too. The future's not set in stone. We get to decide what it looks like.
Well said. To everyone listening, we hope this deep dive gave you some things to think about. Next time you crank that AC, maybe you'll remember, it's not just about staying cool, it's about making choices that are good for the planet too.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us today.
And until next time,
Yeah.
stay curious and stay cool.